What if the most advanced security systems on Earth were not in banks or data centers, but buried beneath sand, stone, ice, and sea, and built thousands of years ago? The dust still clung to my boots when I first saw it. A bronze mechanism no larger than my fist, older than most written languages. The curator in Cairo told me modern locksmiths could not open it. Modern engineers could not recreate it. I thought he was exaggerating. He was not. That lock was the first of 15 devices scattered across the world, each one a quiet impossibility, each one a question the present cannot easily answer. A wooden labyrinth in Japan that remembers a sequence no one alive can recall. A Roman lock frozen in ash that uses technology our textbooks place in the industrial age. A pyramid stone in Egypt that will only move when liquid metal flows through hidden veins. A bone, once living, that responds to the touch of some people and not others. Copper that behaves like steel, glass that opens to a song. Stone that shifts like a living thing. Water and ice and magnetic fields, all trained to say yes or no. Tonight, you are not just watching someone else's journey. You are the explorer. The key rests in your hand. The question is simple. If the ancients could lock something away with such care and genius, what did they think we were not ready to find? The Jerusalem Museum keeps it behind 3 layers of security, which struck me as ironic. The lock itself needs no modern protection. It protects itself. Cast in bronze sometime in the 10th century BCE, this circular mechanism was recovered from excavations beneath the Temple Mount. When I first examined it, I counted 17 moving parts within a housing no larger than my fist. The curator let me hold it for exactly 90 seconds. In that time, I understood why no one has successfully recreated it. The weight surprised me first, too heavy for its size. The bronze has a density that doesn't match any alloy we know from that period. Spectral analysis shows copper and tin, yes, but something else. Something that appears in trace amounts so small the instruments can't identify it. Or maybe they can identify it, and the results just don't make sense for a lock forged 3,000 years ago. The surface is smooth, almost glass-like, despite centuries underground. No corrosion, no patina in the traditional sense. Just this dark mirror finish that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it's the mechanism itself that stops engineers cold. The keyhole, if you can call it that, requires 6 simultaneous movements in 3 dimensions. Imagine trying to turn a key while also pushing it forward, pulling it back, rotating it on 2 different axes, and applying precisely calibrated pressure at 3 different points, all at once, all in perfect synchronization. Modern locksmiths have examined casts of the keyhole. They've used computer modeling to map the internal chambers, and every single one arrives at the same conclusion. This lock shouldn't work. The tolerances are too tight. Bronze, as a material, has too much give, too much flexibility. It should bind. It should jam. It should be impossible to turn. Yet historical accounts from the Second Temple period describe priests opening and closing secured chambers with bronze keys that matched this exact description. Keys that required training to use. Keys that were passed down through specific family lines, along with the knowledge of how to manipulate them correctly. That knowledge died with the temple's destruction in 70 CE, and we've been locked out ever since. I spent my second day in Jerusalem talking to a locksmith who'd spent 20 years trying to pick one of these mechanisms. Not this specific one, museum security would never allow that, but a similar lock recovered from a private collection, 20 years. He showed me his workshop, dozens of keys, hundreds of failed attempts, tools custom made for this single purpose. And you know what he told me? He said he'd gotten it open exactly once. Pure accident. A combination of movements he couldn't remember and has never been able to reproduce. The lock opened, he examined the interior for 30 seconds, and when he tried to lock it again, something inside shifted. It's never opened since. What haunts me isn't the complexity. We have computer-controlled locks today that are far more intricate. What haunts me is the purpose. Solomon's temple wasn't just a religious site. According to tradition, it housed the Ark of the Covenant, sacred texts, knowledge that was considered too dangerous for common access. And this lock was the Guardian, which means somewhere, buried in scrolls we haven't found or inscriptions we haven't decoded, there's a manual, instructions for opening what was never meant to stay closed forever. Just closed until the right person, with the right knowledge, came looking. But that raises another question. What happens when we find those instructions? And more importantly, what's still locked behind doors we haven't even discovered yet? Japan's oldest temple holds more than spiritual history. In a restoration vault beneath the main hall, I found myself staring at a wooden lock from 607 CE that makes modern combination locks look primitive. It's carved from a single piece of hinoki cypress, with channels and chambers flowing through the grain like a frozen river. No keys, no external marks, just pressure points that must be touched in a specific sequence with specific force at specific angles. The master carpenter who showed it to me said his grandfather spent 40 years studying it and never found the solution. The wood itself is remarkable. Hinoki cypress is known for its stability, its resistance to decay, its subtle fragrance that persists for centuries. But this piece is different. The grain patterns aren't natural. They've been guided somehow during growth, shaped while the tree was still alive, creating pathways through the wood that follow routes no saw could cut. Modern dendrologists have examined core samples from the edges. The growth rings show stress patterns consistent with deliberate manipulation. Someone, 1400 years ago, understood how to train a living tree to grow into the shape they needed. Then they harvested it at the precise moment when the wood's properties would be optimal for what they were building. The lock mechanism uses the wood's natural flexibility in ways we're only beginning to understand. Press one point, and the compression travels through internal channels, triggering responses in chambers you can't see. But press too hard, or at the wrong angle, and the wood absorbs the pressure harmlessly. Nothing happens. No feedback, no indication whether you're close or completely wrong. It's like trying to play a musical instrument where you can't hear the notes you're producing. You just have to trust that somewhere, in some combination of touches, the right melody exists. What makes it genuinely impossible to crack is the wood's transformation over time. 14 centuries of environmental exposure have petrified the outer layers while leaving the interior somehow flexible. X-ray analysis is useless. The density variations are so extreme that the images come back as white noise. CT scans fare no better, and destructive analysis, cutting it open to see how it works, would destroy the very mechanism we're trying to understand. So it sits in its climate-controlled case, holding secrets that no living person can access. The master carpenter told me something that stayed with me. He said the lock was never meant to be picked. It was meant to be known. The difference matters. A picked lock is defeated through cleverness or force. A known lock is opened through understanding, through relationship, through initiation into a tradition that carries the answer forward across generations. The monks who built Horyuji weren't creating security through obscurity. They were creating security through lineage. You could only open what you'd been taught to open, and when that teaching line broke, the knowledge broke with it. But here's what kept me awake that night in Nara. The lock still works. After 14 centuries, after wars and earthquakes and fires that consumed other parts of the temple complex, this mechanism still functions. You can feel it when you touch the pressure points. The wood still flexes, the channels still respond. Somewhere inside that grain, the answer is waiting. And according to temple records, there's a scroll written by the original carpenter, hidden in the temple's collection, a scroll that no one has been able to locate for the past 300 years, which means someone, at some point, decided that this particular door should stay closed, at least until someone worthy enough comes looking. But as I moved deeper into this investigation, I started wondering if wooden locks were just the beginning. What if the ancients had found ways to make security systems out of materials we'd never even consider? They pulled it from the Villa of Mysteries 3 years before I arrived. Volcanic ash had preserved it perfectly, frozen mid-turn when Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE. But this lock shouldn't have existed in Roman times. It operates on principles that wouldn't be reinvented until the 18th century. Spring-loaded pins, false gates, anti-picking wards that activate if you try to force it. I held the replica they made at the University of Naples. It took 17 attempts to cast, and even then, it doesn't function quite right. The original, still caked in ash, sits in a climate-controlled case in a basement archive that tourists never see. The curator was reluctant to show me at first. "Too many questions," he said. "Too many researchers who come looking for answers and leave with more mysteries than they brought." But eventually, he relented. And the moment I saw it, I understood his hesitation. This wasn't just advanced for its time, it was advanced for any time. The precision of the internal components suggests manufacturing techniques that Rome supposedly didn't possess. Tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter. Surface finishing batt indicates some form of precision grinding or lapping process. What troubles metallurgists most is the composition. The lock is made from a brass alloy that contains zinc in proportions that require distillation methods. The Romans knew about brass, yes. But this particular formulation, this specific ratio of copper to zinc with trace amounts of tin and lead, creates a metal with properties perfectly suited for a locking mechanism. It's hard enough to resist picking, springy enough to power the internal pins, resistant to corrosion even after 2 millennia underground. Either someone in Pompeii had access to metallurgical knowledge far beyond what we see in any other Roman artifact, or this lock came from somewhere else entirely. I spent 2 days examining the replica under different lighting conditions, trying to understand how it worked. The key, when inserted, pushes spring-loaded pins upward. Simple enough. But here's where it gets sophisticated. Some of the pins are false. They look identical to the real ones, but they're designed to bind the mechanism if you push them too far. An experienced lockpicker would feel the false gates and assume they'd found the shear line. They'd apply turning pressure, expecting the lock to open. Instead, a secondary set of wards would engage, effectively jamming the mechanism until the correct key was used to reset it. This is technology that Yale wouldn't patent until 1848. Yet here it was, buried in volcanic ash, 17 centuries earlier. The villa where they found it wasn't a treasury or a governmental building. It was a private residence, which raises uncomfortable questions about what a wealthy Roman citizen felt they needed to protect with this level of security. The room it sealed was small, barely 3 meters square. Frescoes on the walls depicted mystery cult initiations, religious ceremonies that were technically legal in Rome but closely guarded, secret knowledge that initiates swore never to reveal, and this lock was the physical embodiment of that secrecy. Modern locksmiths who examine the replica inevitably ask the same question: who taught the Romans this? Because nothing else in their civilization suggests they had this knowledge. Their standard locks were simple ward locks, clever, functional, but nothing like this ghost of future engineering buried in ash. The locksmith in Naples who made the replica told me something I haven't been able to forget. He said the Romans didn't invent this, they inherited it. From who, he couldn't say. But somewhere in the empire's vast network of conquered territories and absorbed cultures, someone knew secrets about metalworking and mechanical engineering that make our assumptions about ancient technology look dangerously incomplete. And if bronze and wood could hold such sophisticated secrets, I had to wonder what the pyramid builders had achieved with stone itself. The Red Pyramid holds many secrets, but the one that brought me to Egypt's desert wasn't inside the burial chamber. It was sealing a side passage that archaeologists discovered in 1998. Granite, perfectly fitted, and a locking mechanism embedded in the stone itself that uses weight, counterweight, and what appears to be a mercury-based trigger system. Modern engineers can describe how it might work, but they can't demonstrate it. Every attempt to build a working model fails at the same point. The mercury won't flow with the necessary precision in a modern construct. I arrived at Dashur on a morning when the desert wind was stripping paint off our vehicles. The pyramid rose from the sand like a statement in red limestone, its surface catching the early light. But my destination was below ground, in passages that most tourists never see. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities doesn't advertise this particular feature. Too many questions, too many theories that challenge conventional understanding of Old Kingdom capabilities. The archaeologist who met me there had spent 6 years studying this single mechanism. The passage itself descends at a 26-degree angle, perfectly aligned with celestial coordinates that matter on specific dates. At the bottom, a granite plug. Not a door exactly, more like a 3-ton stone cylinder fitted into a shaft with clearances so tight you can't slide paper through the gaps. And within that stone, channels, carved with some kind of tubular drill that left marks indicating rotation speeds we can't explain. The channels form a network, a 3-dimensional maze inside solid granite. Here's how it theoretically works. Mercury, being extremely dense and fluid, would flow through the channels based on the pyramid's orientation and the external temperature. Pour mercury into the intake port at the top, and it would navigate the internal maze, eventually reaching a counterweight chamber. Fill that chamber to the precise level, and the weight distribution shifts just enough to allow the granite plug to rotate. Not slide, rotate. On an axis so perfectly balanced that 3 tons of stone could be moved with minimal force, assuming you had the right amount of mercury in the right place at the right time. Egyptian engineers have mapped the channels with ground-penetrating radar and endoscopic cameras. They understand the geometry, they've calculated the volume of mercury needed, roughly 12 kilograms. They know the counterweight chamber's location and capacity. But when they built a scaled model using modern machining techniques, the mercury pooled incorrectly. Air bubbles formed in the channels. The flow dynamics didn't match the theoretical requirements. Something about the ancient stonework creates fluid dynamics that our precision manufacturing can't reproduce. What keeps me up at night isn't the engineering impressive as it is, it's the hieroglyphs. The passage walls are covered in warnings, not promises. They don't speak of treasure or royal burial beds. They speak of knowledge, specifically, knowledge of the previous world. The text references floods, catastrophes, and wisdom preserved from before the current age of man. Egyptian mythology talks about Zep-Tepi, the first time, an earlier epoch when the gods walked among humans and taught them civilization's foundations. Most scholars treat this as mythology, but standing in front of a locking mechanism that uses principles of fluid dynamics and precision engineering that shouldn't exist in the 3rd millennium BCE, mythology starts feeling insufficient as an explanation. The passage remains sealed. The ministry has no plans to open it, partly because they don't know how without damaging the mechanism, partly because there's genuine uncertainty about what they'd find. And I think that uncertainty is warranted. Because if the ancient Egyptians could create locks this sophisticated in stone, what other materials might they have mastered? What secrets might be hidden in organic substances that have long since turned to dust? In a Korean museum basement, I held something that shouldn't function at all. A lock carved entirely from human bone, dated to the 7th century CE. Not just any bone, the curator explained. The femur of someone who died at exactly age 33, prepared through methods we don't understand. The lock mechanism uses the natural porosity of bone tissue as a kind of biological computer. Moisture levels, temperature changes, even, according to some researchers, the electrical field of the person holding it. Try to force it, and the bone splinters in a way that destroys the mechanism forever. The curator's hands were shaking slightly when he placed it in mine. This particular lock had been in the museum's collection for 40 years, but only a handful of researchers had been permitted to handle it. The bone was smooth, almost polished, with a warmth that seemed wrong for something so old. It weighed less than I expected. Hollow, obviously, but the weight distribution felt deliberately crafted, balanced in a way that made it want to rest in a specific orientation in my palm. That wasn't accidental. Bone is a living material, or was living once. Even after death, it retains a microstructure of incredible complexity. Collagen fibers woven through hydroxyapatite crystals, microscopic channels where blood vessels once ran. Spaces where cells once lived and died. The Silla craftsmen understood the structure in ways that modern bioengineers are only beginning to appreciate. They knew that bone responds to stress, to humidity, to temperature, and they turned those responses into a security system. The lock's exterior shows no obvious keyhole, just subtle depressions, barely visible grooves that spiral around the bone's surface. Press these points in the correct sequence, and theoretically, the internal structure flexes. Pressure waves travel through the trabecular network inside the bone, triggering releases in chambers you cannot see. But here's where it becomes genuinely strange. The bone seems to respond differently depending on who's holding it. Some researchers report feeling slight vibrations when they touch certain points. Others feel nothing. Temperature measurements taken during handling show localized heating in specific areas, but only for certain individuals. The prevailing theory involves bioelectricity. Human bodies generate weak electrical fields, measurable but subtle. These fields vary from person to person based on factors we don't fully understand. Heart rhythm, neural activity, even emotional state might play a role. The Silla lock, according to researchers at Seoul National University, may be using the bone's piezoelectric properties to detect these fields. Bone, when compressed, generates minute electrical charges. The lock could be reading the holder's bioelectric signature, comparing it to some kind of template encoded in the bone structure itself, open only for the right person, destroy itself for anyone else. I spent 3 days studying it under supervision, different times of day, different environmental conditions, different mental states, though I'm not sure that matters. Each time I felt something, a faint warmth, a sense of the bone almost listening to my touch. But nothing opened, no chambers released, no secrets revealed. The curator said this was normal. In 4 decades, no one had successfully activated the mechanism. They don't even know if it's still functional after 13 centuries. But what troubles me most is the specificity. Age 33. Why that exact age? The curator mentioned it was considered spiritually significant in Silla culture, an age of peak physical and mental maturity. But there's another possibility. Bone structure changes throughout life. Density, porosity, crystalline arrangement, all evolving with age. At 33, perhaps, the bone possesses properties that don't exist at 32 or 34. Properties the Silla craftsmen needed for their biological lock to function. Which raises a darker question. How many people died at exactly the wrong age before they found the right one? And what knowledge was considered valuable enough to lock away in human remains? But bone wasn't the only organic material the ancients transformed into impossible security. Across the ancient world, in a civilization we barely understand, craftsmen were working with metals in ways that challenge everything we think we know about metallurgy. The Indus Valley civilization left us many mysteries, but this one literally spirals into impossibility. Found in the 1920s during initial excavations, this lock is a copper coil that descends into itself, creating a 3-dimensional maze within a space the size of a tennis ball. The key, if it exists, would need to navigate 17 layers of spiral while rotating, descending, and expanding simultaneously. Metallurgical analysis shows the copper was somehow work-hardened to steel-like strength without brittleness. A process we still can't replicate. I first saw it in Karachi in a vault that required 3 separate authorizations to access. The Pakistani Department of Archaeology doesn't display this artifact publicly. Too fragile, they claim officially. Too controversial, I suspect actually, because this lock represents capabilities that the Indus Valley civilization supposedly didn't possess. Advanced metallurgy, precision manufacturing, mathematical understanding of 3-dimensional spirals that wouldn't be formalized until the Renaissance. The archaeologist who supervised my examination had published 2 papers attempting to explain it. Both papers raised more questions than they answered. The spiral itself is mesmerizing. Copper wire, roughly 2 millimeters thick, coiled in a pattern that defies simple description. It's not a single continuous spiral, it's multiple spirals, interlocking, descending through each other in impossible ways. Imagine a spring that somehow passes through itself without breaking the metal. Now imagine 17 of those springs nested within each other, each one creating pathways and barriers for the others. The tolerances are absurd. Gaps between coils measured in hundredths of a millimeter. And this was created 4,000 years ago, before precision measuring tools, before mathematical notation for describing such curves, before any civilization we know of had developed the conceptual framework for thinking about 3-dimensional topology. The copper itself is wrong. Standard copper work hardens when you bend it, yes, but it also becomes brittle. Bend it too much, and it cracks. Heat it to anneal and restore ductility, and you lose the hardness. It's a fundamental trade-off in metallurgy. Yet this copper has been work-hardened to a point where it's as strong as modern steel without any of the brittleness that should accompany such treatment. Spectrographic analysis shows it's pure copper, no alloying elements that might explain the properties, just copper that behaves in ways our metallurgy textbooks say copper shouldn't behave. I watched a modern locksmith in Mumbai attempt to trace the path with an endoscope. He'd spent 2 years preparing for this, custom-made tools, flexible cameras thin enough to navigate the tightest gaps, computer software to map the three-dimensional structure as he explored. After 2 hours, he gave up. The spiral, he said, contained false paths, routes that seemed to lead somewhere but terminated in barriers so fine his camera couldn't detect them until it was too late. Dead ends that forced him to backtrack, losing his position in the labyrinth. And that's assuming there even is a path. It's possible the lock was never meant to be opened, just meant to exist as proof of capability. The Indus Valley civilization had no written language we can decipher, no royal inscriptions, no explanatory texts. They left us cities with sophisticated urban planning, advanced drainage systems, and standardized weights and measures, but no temples, no palaces, no obvious hierarchy, and locks like this one suggesting knowledge that we can document but not explain. The archaeologist in Karachi told me something that's haunted me since. He said the Indus people didn't write down their knowledge because they didn't need to. They encoded it in objects, in seals, in pottery, in locks that function as three-dimensional textbooks for anyone who knows how to read them. The problem is, we've forgotten the language. But copper spirals weren't the most troubling thing I encountered. In Alexandria's flooded ruins, archaeologists had recovered something even stranger. A lock made from a material so fragile it should have shattered millennia ago, yet somehow it survived, holding secrets about ancient understanding of physics that we're only beginning to glimpse. They don't display it publicly. Too fragile, they claim. But I think it's too disturbing. Recovered from underwater excavations off Alexandria's coast, this lock is made entirely of glass, using techniques that wouldn't be reinvented until Venetian masters perfected them 1,500 years later. But here's what makes it impossible. The glass isn't just shaped, it's programmed. Internal stress patterns create channels that only respond to specific vibrational frequencies. Strike the wrong note, and the glass shatters. Find the right frequency, and the mechanism releases. The recovery itself was miraculous. Mediterranean seawater should have etched the glass, clouded it, weakened its structure over 2 millennia of submersion. Instead, the lock emerged nearly pristine, protected somehow by the very seabed that buried it. Marine archaeologists found it in what they believe was the remains of the Great Library's private archive. Not the main reading rooms that tourists imagine, the restricted section, the place where dangerous knowledge was kept under literal lock and key. Or in this case, under lock and sound. I examined it in an Alexandria museum's conservation lab, wearing gloves and standing on rubber matting. Any vibration, any accidental impact could destroy it. The glass is clearer than anything produced in the ancient world should be. No bubbles, no impurities, no color variation. Modern glass manufacturers achieve this clarity through chemical processes involving lead oxide or barium. But spectroscopic analysis shows this glass contains neither. It's soda-lime glass, the most basic formulation possible, somehow refined to optical quality through methods we don't understand. The lock mechanism is visible inside the glass, chambers and levers, frozen in transparency. You can see exactly how it works, which makes the impossibility more frustrating. Internal stress patterns create zones of different refractive indices within the glass. These zones act as waveguides, channels that would direct sound waves of specific frequencies to specific points in the mechanism. Apply the correct frequency, and the sound energy causes microscopic movements in the glass structure. Nothing you could see, just enough molecular rearrangement to release an internal catch. Modern researchers have mapped the stress patterns with laser interferometry. They know, theoretically, what frequency is needed. Somewhere between 400 and 450 Hz, roughly the note A above middle C, but with harmonic overtones in a specific pattern. They've calculated the amplitude required. They've modeled the wave propagation through the glass structure, but producing the sound precisely enough? That's where every attempt fails. Generate a tone even slightly off frequency, and nothing happens. Push the amplitude too high, and stress fractures begin forming in the glass. One research team got close in 2019. They generated what they believed was the correct frequency. The lock responded. They heard something click inside the glass. Then a hairline crack appeared, spreading from one of the stress concentration points. They stopped immediately. What keeps me awake isn't the mechanism itself, it's the implication. This lock requires understanding of acoustics, material science, and wave physics at a level that shouldn't exist in the Hellenistic period. The ancient Greeks knew about musical harmony, yes. Pythagoras had explored mathematical ratios in musical intervals, but this goes far beyond theoretical mathematics. This is applied physics, practical engineering using principles that we didn't formalize until the 19th century. Someone in Alexandria understood how sound propagates through solid materials, how to create stress patterns in glass that would respond to specific frequencies, how to build a lock that couldn't be picked, couldn't be forced, could only be opened through knowledge. The conservation team leader told me they'd found references in fragmentary papyri, mentions of locks that sang, doors that opened to the right voice, the right prayer, the right invocation. Scholars always assumed these were metaphors, poetic descriptions of religious or philosophical access to knowledge. But standing in front of this glass lock, watching light refract through its internal structures, I realized we'd been reading the texts wrong. They weren't metaphors, they were instruction manuals. And most of the instructions are underwater, dissolved into the Mediterranean, lost to fires and conquests and time. Yet if the ancients could encode security into sound and glass, I had to wonder what they'd achieved with stone itself. In the Andes, megalithic walls held secrets that made acoustic locks seem almost simple by comparison. High in the Peruvian Andes, I stood before a wall that defies every principle of masonry. But it's not the wall that haunts me, it's the lock. Embedded in a megalith weighing approximately 80 tons, this mechanism uses no metal, no moving parts in the traditional sense, just stone, fitted with such precision that you can't slip a piece of paper between the components. And yet, according to local knowledge keepers, there's a way to open it, a sequence of pressure applications that causes the stone itself to shift. The altitude made every breath deliberate. 3,600 meters above sea level, the air thin enough that thinking felt like work. But the stones demanded attention. Sacsayhuamán's walls are famous for their polygonal masonry, blocks with dozens of faces fitted together like a three-dimensional puzzle. Spanish chroniclers who saw these walls intact reported that no mortar held them together, just stone against stone, so precisely cut that the joints were nearly invisible. Modern engineers confirm this. The blocks are fitted with tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter, earthquake-proof, time-proof, technique-proof in the sense that we still don't know how the Inca achieved it. But this particular block is different. It sits in the fortress's second terrace, unremarkable to tourists who photograph the more dramatic formations above. Yet local guides, the ones whose families have lived in Cusco for generations, know its significance. They call it the doorway stone, not because it looks like a door, because it is one. Embedded within its mass is a locking mechanism that uses the stone's weight and position as the security system itself. Ground-penetrating radar confirms there's a void behind this block, a chamber roughly 3 meters deep, 2 meters wide. The stone isn't solid, it's a plug, fitted into an opening with the same impossible precision as the visible walls. And according to tradition maintained by the Quechua people, this plug can be moved, not lifted, not slid horizontally, moved through a sequence of pressure applications at specific points on its surface that cause the stone to rotate slightly on an axis we can't detect. Apply pressure in the right places, in the right order, with the right amount of force, and internal counterweights shift. The stone becomes temporarily unbalanced. And in that moment of imbalance, a person of sufficient strength could push it inward, accessing whatever lies behind. Modern engineers have studied it with every non-invasive technology available. Laser scanning to map the surface, sonar to probe the joints, seismic analysis to understand the internal structure. They've identified points on the stone surface that show unusual wear patterns, subtle depressions consistent with repeated pressure application over centuries. These points form a pattern, not random, not decorative, functional, a sequence. But knowing where to press doesn't tell you how hard, how long, or in what order. The stone weighs 80 tons. Press wrong, and nothing happens. Press right, and supposedly, physics cooperates. I spent a day with a Quechua elder who claims his grandfather's grandfather knew the sequence. He placed my hands on the stone, guiding them to the pressure points. The surface was cold, granite weathered by 5 centuries of exposure. He showed me 7 points. Press here, wait for the count of 3, press here, immediately press here and here simultaneously. The specificity was remarkable. But when I asked if he knew the complete sequence, he shook his head. The knowledge had been incomplete when his grandfather learned it. Parts were deliberately withheld, perhaps lost, perhaps hidden for reasons his family no longer remembered. What chills me is the implication. The Inca built this fortress using techniques we can observe but not replicate. Stones fitted so precisely that modern laser cutting technology struggles to match the tolerances. And within that already impossible construction, they embedded a locking mechanism even more sophisticated. A lock without keys, without metal, without anything except stone and knowledge. Which means the chamber behind it contains something they believed was worth protecting with the most advanced security they could devise. But stone and pressure weren't the only principles the ancients mastered. Halfway around the world, in the tombs of imperial China, engineers had discovered how to turn the Earth's magnetic field itself into an impenetrable barrier. The first time I saw one, I thought it was decorative. Jade plaques arranged in a pattern around a tomb entrance, dated to approximately 200 BCE. But when I reached out to touch one, my guide grabbed my wrist. The plaques are magnetized, he explained, in a pattern that creates a field precise enough to trigger an internal mechanism. Remove one plaque, and the field collapses, permanently sealing the lock. The Chinese Academy of Sciences has mapped these magnetic fields. They're stronger than they should be for natural magnetite and arranged in a pattern that suggests understanding of magnetic principles that wouldn't be formalized until the 19th century. The tomb sits in Shaanxi province, one of dozens that dot the landscape around the ancient capital. Most have been looted. This one hasn't. Not because grave robbers didn't try. The entrance passage shows evidence of multiple attempts. Tunnels started and abandoned, tool marks where people tried to break through the stone. But the inner chamber remains sealed. The magnetic lock saw to that. And everyone who studied it agrees. Breach this security system incorrectly, and you'll never get inside. The mechanism is designed to fail closed. The jade plaques themselves are remarkable. Nephrite jade, polished to a mirror finish, each one approximately 10 centimeters square. They're arranged in a specific geometric pattern around the tomb entrance. Not a circle, not a square. Something more complex. A pattern that modern mathematicians recognize as related to optimal packing problems and magnetic field distribution. Each plaque contains inclusions of magnetite, iron oxide particles naturally present in the jade. But here's where it gets strange. The magnetite isn't randomly distributed. It's concentrated in specific areas within each plaque, creating magnetic poles that interact with neighboring plaques in precise ways. When I was finally permitted to approach with measuring equipment, the magnetic field strength surprised me. Natural magnetite produces weak fields. These plaques generate fields roughly 10 times stronger than they should. Somehow, 2,000 years ago, Han Dynasty craftsmen figured out how to enhance the magnetic properties of natural materials. Modern researchers have theories. Perhaps they used lightning strikes to magnetize the stones. Perhaps they understood magnetic induction through techniques we've lost. Perhaps they had access to magnetic materials we don't know about. None of the theories fully explain the observations. The lock mechanism, as far as ground-penetrating radar can determine, works through magnetic coupling. Behind the visible plaques inside the tomb's entrance structure are iron components, bars, levers, counterweights. These components are positioned so they're held in place by the magnetic fields from the jade plaques. Remove a plaque, and its field disappears. The iron component it was holding shifts position. That shift triggers a cascade. Other components move. Stone blocks slide, and the entire entrance mechanism reconfigures itself into a locked state that can't be reversed. At least, that's the theory. No one's tested it. Testing would mean destroying a 2,000-year-old tomb security system that we can't recreate. What keeps me returning to this site is the question of knowledge transfer. Who taught the Han Dynasty about magnetism? Chinese texts from the period mention lodestones and their ability to attract iron. They describe magnetic compasses used for geomancy and navigation, but going from understanding that lodestones point north to engineering a security system based on magnetic field interactions? That's a leap. A massive leap. It requires understanding magnetic fields as three-dimensional phenomena, understanding how multiple magnets interact, understanding how to create stable, permanent magnetic patterns in stone. This is physics. Applied physics at a level that suggests either remarkable independent discovery or knowledge inherited from an earlier tradition we don't have records of. The archaeologist who manages the site told me something I found deeply unsettling. He said they've identified at least 17 other tombs in the region with similar magnetic signatures. 17 tombs, all sealed with variations of this same magnetic locking system. All still closed. All waiting for someone to figure out the correct sequence to open them without triggering the failsafe. But as I left Shaanxi, heading south toward the tropical forests, I couldn't shake the feeling that magnetism was just one force the ancients had learned to harness. In Cambodia, I'd heard rumors of locks that used water itself as the key, responding to pressures so subtle they might as well be measuring the weight of rain. Cambodia's temple complex is famous for its architecture. Less known is the hydraulic locking system discovered in 2015 beneath one of the subsidiary temples. Channels carved in stone, designed to fill with monsoon rainwater in a specific sequence. Get the water levels exactly right and internal chambers shift, releasing doors that weigh several tons. But here's the problem. The precision required means the system only works a few days per year, when rainfall, temperature, and barometric pressure align perfectly. Modern hydraulic engineers can describe the principles. They just can't replicate the sensitivity. I arrived during the dry season, which meant the lock was dormant. The channels were empty, their stone surfaces worn smooth by centuries of water flow. But you could still read the engineering in the carving patterns. The main channel descends from the temple roof, collecting rainwater through a series of carefully positioned drains. This water then flows into a distribution system, multiple smaller channels that branch off at specific angles. Each branch fills at a different rate depending on the flow velocity and channel dimensions. It's hydraulic computing. Using water flow as the input, channel geometry as the processor, and chamber filling as the output. The Khmer engineers understood fluid dynamics in ways that surprised modern researchers. Water doesn't flow uniformly. It turbulates. It creates eddies. It responds to surface tension, viscosity, and pressure gradients. Control these factors, and you can make water behave in remarkably precise ways. The channels at Angkor Wat exploit every one of these properties. Some sections are polished smooth to reduce friction. Others are deliberately roughened to slow flow. Some channels widen gradually. Others constrict suddenly, creating pressure differentials that control downstream behavior. The locking mechanism relies on buoyancy. Behind the sealed door, accessible only through the hydraulic channels, is a chamber containing stone floats. These floats rest on the bottom when the chamber is empty, positioning counterweights that keep the door locked. Fill the chamber with water, and the floats rise, shifting the counterweights, allowing the door to swing open. Simple enough in principle, except the tolerances are absurd. The floats must rise to exactly the right height. Too low, and the counterweights don't shift enough. Too high, and they overcompensate, jamming the mechanism. The window of correct operation is measured in millimeters of water level. What makes this truly impossible to replicate is the environmental sensitivity. The system doesn't just need water. It needs water at the right temperature, which affects its density and viscosity. It needs the right atmospheric pressure, which affects how water flows through narrow channels. It needs the right rainfall intensity, which determines whether the channels fill uniformly or create surges that disrupt the timing. Get any of these factors wrong, and the floats don't reach the correct position. The door stays locked, and here's the remarkable part. The Khmer builders designed this system to work only during specific weather conditions that occur naturally in Cambodia's monsoon cycle. A few days in late June or early July, when rainfall patterns, temperature, and atmospheric pressure create the perfect combination. Modern hydraulic engineers from the Asian Institute of Technology have been monitoring this lock for 7 years. They've recorded water flow rates. They've measured channel dimensions with laser scanners. They've built computer simulations that model the fluid dynamics. And they've concluded that while they can describe what happens, they cannot replicate it. The sensitivity is too high. Modern manufacturing can cut channels to the right dimensions, yes, but modern materials behave differently than ancient stone. Surface properties matter. Mineralization patterns matter. Even the microscopic texture of the stone affects water flow in ways that computer models don't capture. I spent 3 days photographing the channels from every angle, trying to understand the design philosophy. Why create a lock that only works a few days per year? The answer, I think, is religious. This wasn't just security, this was ritual. The door opens when the heavens provide the key, when the rains come in the right pattern, at the right time, with the right intensity. It's a lock that requires divine cooperation. Or perhaps celestial timing. And that made me wonder about the other locks I'd encountered. How many of them incorporated astronomical or environmental factors we've overlooked? But water wasn't the strangest medium the ancients had mastered. In the archives of ancient Mesopotamia, I'd learned of locks made from materials so humble we'd never think to use them for security. Materials like clay, fired to hardness but retaining properties that made them impossible to replicate. In the British Museum's storage facility, I examined something that challenged everything I thought I knew about ancient Mesopotamia. A clay lock from approximately 3000 BCE, making it potentially the oldest sophisticated locking mechanism ever discovered. But calling it a lock is almost insulting. It's a puzzle box that uses the properties of fired clay itself. Press the wrong spot and the clay fractures, sealing the box forever. Press the right sequence and the clay flexes just enough to release an internal catch. Ceramic engineers have x-rayed it. They've mapped the density variations. They know there's something inside. But opening it means solving a puzzle that's older than writing itself. The curator who brought it out from storage handled it like it might explode. In a sense, it might. Clay, once fired, becomes brittle. It doesn't flex, it doesn't bend, it cracks. This is fundamental ceramic behavior. Yet this lock depends on the clay doing something clay shouldn't do. Flexing without breaking, responding to pressure without fracturing. It's as if the ancient Mesopotamian craftsmen understood ceramic physics at a molecular level that we're only now beginning to explore through material science. The box itself is roughly the size of a shoebox, covered in cuneiform inscriptions that predate the standardized writing system. The text is pictographic, closer to the proto-writing found on the earliest Sumerian tablets. Translation is uncertain, but the consensus suggests warnings, phrases that might mean knowledge not for hands, or sealed until the knowing, or something that translates awkwardly as truth that breaks the unprepared. Scholars debate the meaning, but standing there with the box in my hands, I felt certain the warnings weren't metaphorical. X-ray imaging reveals the internal structure, chambers within chambers, walls of varying thickness, areas of higher and lower density clay, and at the center, something, an object. The X-rays can't determine what it is. Too dense to be papyrus or wood, too uniform to be jewelry or coins. Just a shape, roughly cylindrical, approximately 10 centimeters long, and completely inaccessible without solving the lock. The puzzle mechanism works through stress distribution. Clay, when pressed, distributes force through its structure. Press the right spot with the right amount of force, and the stress follows paths of least resistance through the clay's internal architecture. These paths lead to weak points, deliberately engineered weak points where the clay is thin enough to flex without breaking. Flex enough of these points in the right sequence, and an internal catch releases. But press the wrong spot, or press too hard, or press in the wrong order, and you create stress concentrations in areas where the clay is already under tension from the firing process. The clay fractures. And once it fractures, the internal structure collapses. Whatever's inside becomes permanently entombed. Modern ceramic engineers at University College London have been studying this lock for 12 years. They've created multiple replicas using various clay compositions, firing temperatures, and techniques. None of them work correctly. The replicas either crack too easily, making the lock impossible to open even with the correct sequence, or they don't flex enough, making the mechanism non-functional. The ancient clay has properties that modern ceramics can't match. Something about the firing process, or the clay source, or preparation methods creates a material that exists in a precise balance between brittleness and flexibility. Every simulation suggests that if we get the sequence wrong, 5,000 years of knowledge will be destroyed in seconds. The clay will crack, the internal structure will collapse, and whatever object lies at the center will be buried in ceramic fragments that can never be reassembled. So the box sits in climate-controlled storage, scanned, measured, analyzed, but unopened. A puzzle from the dawn of civilization still keeping its secret. And I can't help wondering if that's the point. Perhaps some knowledge is meant to remain locked until we're advanced enough to open it without destroying it. But clay wasn't the only material that confused me. Far to the north, in regions where winter lasts half the year, I'd heard of locks that used ice itself as the mechanism, not metaphorically, literally. Ice that had to freeze in specific patterns, creating crystalline structures that would either open a passage or seal it forever. This one wasn't in a museum. It was still in the ground when I found it, preserved in permafrost that's held it frozen for at least 3,000 years. The lock mechanism uses ice itself as the medium. Channels carved in mammoth ivory, designed to be filled with water that freezes into the precise shapes needed to trigger the release. But here's where it becomes impossible. The water needs to freeze at different rates in different chambers, creating a sequence of crystallization that only occurs under very specific temperature gradients. Russian scientists have studied it in situ for 2 years. They understand the principle. They just can't make it work. The site is located roughly 400 kilometers north of Yakutsk, accessible only by helicopter during the brief summer months when the tundra isn't completely impassable. The excavation team discovered it by accident while surveying permafrost degradation. Ground-penetrating radar showed an anomaly, something structural, something deliberate. When they carefully exposed it, they found mammoth ivory carved into a box roughly 1 meter on each side, and embedded in that ivory a locking mechanism that uses ice crystals as moving parts. Mammoth ivory is remarkable material. Unlike elephant ivory, it's been frozen for millennia, making it incredibly stable. The cold has preserved the internal structure, the microscopic channels where blood vessels and nerves once ran. The ancient craftsmen understood this structure. They carved channels that follow the natural grain of the ivory, exploiting the material's existing pathways. These channels are designed to hold water, but not just any water. The Russian team's analysis suggests the water must contain specific mineral concentrations, dissolved salts, trace elements. Composition matters because it affects how the water freezes. Water doesn't freeze uniformly, it crystallizes. Ice crystals form at nucleation points and grow outward in branching patterns. Temperature affects growth rate. Mineral content affects crystal structure. The channels in this lock are designed so that when water freezes inside them, the ice crystals grow in specific directions at specific rates, creating pressure in specific chambers. This pressure pushes ivory pins. the pins shift position. And when enough pins have shifted in the right sequence, an internal mechanism releases. In theory, no one has successfully demonstrated it. The problem is control. Modern freezers create uniform temperature environments. Too uniform. The ancient lock requires temperature gradients. One chamber must freeze before another. One area must reach -5 degrees Celsius, while another is still at -2. These gradients need to be maintained for several hours during the freezing process. In nature, during the Siberian winter, these gradients occur naturally. Air temperature drops, ground temperature follows. But there's lag, there's variation. The ivory's thermal properties create microclimates within the structure, and somehow, 3,000 years ago, craftsmen designed channels that exploit these natural phenomena to create a sequential locking mechanism. Russian scientists have built insulated chambers around the lock to study it without removing it from the permafrost. They've installed temperature sensors in dozens of locations. They've monitored humidity. They've measured ice crystal formation rates. And they've concluded that replicating the conditions artificially is beyond current technology. They can create cold environments, yes, but they can't create the subtle, chaotic variations that natural winter provides. The randomness matters, the unpredictability is part of the mechanism. Climate change is melting the permafrost. The excavation site's average temperature has risen 2 degrees in the past decade. The Russian team estimates they have perhaps 15 years before the site becomes unstable. 15 years to understand a locking mechanism that uses ice, ivory, and winter itself as components. And I found myself wondering, as I stood in that frozen landscape, what knowledge was valuable enough to seal in ice? What information required protection that would literally melt away if the climate changed? But ivory and ice weren't the most unsettling materials I encountered. In Mexico, in the collections from pre-Columbian civilizations, there existed locks made from volcanic glass that defied every principle of material science I'd ever learned. In a restricted section of the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, I held something that shouldn't be possible to manufacture. Even today, a lock carved from a single piece of volcanic glass, with internal chambers and passages somehow created inside solid obsidian. Not drilled, not carved from multiple pieces and fused. Somehow formed within the stone itself. Modern material scientists have proposed theories, controlled heating and cooling, somehow introducing channels into molten obsidian. But every attempt to reproduce this technology has failed. The obsidian either cracks from thermal stress or the channels collapse before the glass can solidify. The lock came from Teotihuacan's Pyramid of the Moon, recovered during excavations in the early 2000s. It was found in a sealed chamber that showed no signs of looting, surrounded by offerings of jade, shell, and animal remains. The obsidian itself is beautiful, black as midnight, with a glassy luster that catches light in ways that seem almost liquid. But beautiful doesn't mean fragile. Obsidian is volcanic glass, yes, but it's remarkably hard. Ancient Mesoamericans used it for blades sharper than modern surgical steel. They understood this material intimately. But understanding and manufacturing are different things. The internal structure is what baffles everyone. X-ray computed tomography reveals chambers inside the obsidian, hollow spaces connected by channels, forming a three-dimensional maze within the glass. These aren't surface carvings that were later covered, they're truly internal. Surrounded by solid obsidian on all sides, the chambers vary in size from roughly 1 centimeter across down to passages barely 2 millimeters wide, and they show no tool marks, no evidence of drilling, no indication of how they were created. Material scientists at UNAM, The National Autonomous University of Mexico have been studying this artifact for 8 years. Their leading theory involves lost wax casting, but applied to obsidian in ways we don't understand. The process would require creating a wax model of the internal structure, somehow embedding it in obsidian powder or molten obsidian, then heating the assembly to melt out the wax while the obsidian solidifies around the voids. But here's the problem. Obsidian doesn't behave like metal. It doesn't pour smoothly. It doesn't solidify gradually. Heat obsidian enough to make it truly molten, and it loses the properties that make it obsidian. Cool it slowly enough to prevent thermal shock, and it crystallizes into something else entirely. Not glass anymore. Regular volcanic rock. Yet this lock exists. Internal chambers preserved in pristine obsidian that shows no signs of reheating, no crystallization, no stress fractures. The glass is as pure as freshly formed obsidian, as if the chambers simply appeared inside it through some process that left no evidence of manufacture. I spent 2 days examining it under magnification, looking for clues, tool marks, joining lines, anything that would explain construction. Nothing, just smooth obsidian surfaces, internal and external, polished to an impossible finish. The locking mechanism, as far as researchers can determine, works through light. The internal chambers are positioned so that light entering through specific points on the surface refracts through the obsidian, following paths determined by the glass's optical properties. Get the light angles right, and illumination reaches an internal chamber where something, perhaps organic material long since decayed, would have responded. A photoactive substance, something that changes properties when exposed to light of specific wavelengths. Remove the light, and the substance reverts, locking the mechanism again. This is speculation, of course. The chamber that would have held the photoactive material is empty now. Whatever was there decomposed centuries ago, but the optical paths remain, frozen in glass. And when researchers shine lasers through the lock at calculated angles, they can trace the light paths converging on that empty chamber. The precision is remarkable. Angles matter to within fractions of a degree. Wavelength matters. The obsidian acts as an optical computer, processing light inputs to determine whether the lock should open. The curator who supervised my examination said something that's haunted me since. He asked if I'd noticed the lock's weight distribution. I hadn't. He placed it in my hands again, asking me to feel where the center of mass was. Not in the geometric center. Offset. Deliberately offset. Because the lock is designed to rest in a specific orientation. Place it correctly, and the internal chambers align with external light sources. Sunlight, perhaps, or starlight. Place it wrong, and the optical paths don't work. The lock won't open no matter what you do. Which means this mechanism didn't just require knowledge, it required ritual, positioning, timing. But obsidian wasn't the final mystery I'd encounter. In the steppes of Central Asia, locked away in collections most people never see, there existed locks made from gold that behaved in ways gold simply shouldn't behave. The Hermitage keeps its Scythian gold collection under extraordinary security, and after examining this lock, I understand why. Gold is soft. It shouldn't be able to form a strong mechanism. Yet this lock, recovered from a Kurgan burial in Kazakhstan, uses gold's unique properties to create a security system that becomes stronger when tampered with. The gold is somehow work-hardened through a process that leaves no tool marks, no hammering patterns, no evidence of how it was achieved. Modern metallurgists call it cold work hardening, but taken to an impossible extreme. Apply force, and the gold hardens further. Try to pick it, and the internal structure actually grows stronger. I traveled to St. Petersburg in winter, which felt appropriate somehow. The Scythians were nomadic people of the steppes, familiar with harsh cold and harder survival. Their gold work is legendary. Intricate animal designs, detailed figurative scenes, technical mastery that rivals anything produced in the ancient world. But this lock goes beyond artistry into metallurgy that shouldn't exist. The curator who retrieved it from the vault wore gloves. Not to protect the gold from oils on his hands, he explained. To protect his hands from the gold's edges. After 3,000 years, the lock's internal components are still sharp enough to cut skin. Gold doesn't stay sharp. This is fundamental to the metal's behavior. Gold is soft, ductile, malleable. You can hammer it into foil so thin it's translucent. You can draw it into wire finer than human hair, but you cannot, under normal circumstances, make it hard. You cannot give it a lasting edge. You cannot create gold components that maintain structural integrity under stress. Yet this lock does all of these things. The internal pins are gold. The springs are gold. The locking bars are gold. And after 3 millennia, they still function with tolerances that would be impressive in modern steel mechanisms. Metallurgical analysis at the Hermitage's Conservation Laboratory shows the gold is extraordinarily pure, 98% gold, with trace amounts of silver and copper. No alloying elements in sufficient quantity to explain the hardness. Standard gold alloys, the ones jewelers use to make wearable jewelry, might reach 60 to 80 on the Vickers hardness scale. This Scythian gold tests at 160. That's harder than annealed copper, approaching the hardness of some bronzes. And it achieved this hardness through cold working, through mechanical deformation at room temperature. But the amount of deformation required to reach this hardness should have caused the gold to crack, should have created visible stress patterns, should have left evidence of the working process. There's nothing. Just gold that behaves impossibly. The lock's most disturbing property is its response to tampering. When researchers attempted to pick it using replica tools, monitoring the internal stress with strain gauges, they discovered something unprecedented. The gold work hardens in real time. Apply force to the pins, try to manipulate the mechanism, and the gold's crystalline structure rearranges itself. Dislocations in the atomic lattice multiply and tangle, increasing hardness at the exact points where force is applied. It's adaptive, responsive. The lock literally defends itself against picking by becoming harder wherever you try to attack it. Modern materials scientists have no explanation for this behavior. Metals don't work harden selectively in response to localized stress, not without external energy input, not without heat or applied current or some driving force. Yet this gold does. Room temperature, no external power. Just 3,000-year-old metallurgy that treats gold like a smart material decades before we invented the concept. The leading theory, and it's barely a theory, suggests the Scythians understood something about gold's atomic structure that we've missed, perhaps related to grain boundary engineering, perhaps involving trace elements we can't detect, perhaps something else entirely. The kurgan where they found this lock also contained weapons. Gold-hilted daggers, gold-fitted arrows, all showing the same impossible hardness, which means this wasn't a one-time achievement. This was a technology, a repeatable process for transforming gold into something stronger than it has any right to be. And that technology died with the Scythians, leaving us with artifacts we can study but not replicate. But gold, for all its mysteries, wasn't the final frontier. In the ruins of ancient Greece, in fragmentary references and surviving mechanisms, I'd found evidence of locks that didn't rely on materials at all. They relied on something far more ephemeral. They relied on light itself, on shadows cast by stars, on celestial mechanics turned into keys that only work when the heavens align. This one exists only in fragments, scattered across 3 museums on 2 continents. But when I pieced together the descriptions, cross-referenced the archaeological reports, and examined the surviving components, I found myself staring at something that challenges the definition of a lock entirely. This mechanism doesn't use keys or combinations. It uses light. Specifically, it uses shadows cast at precise angles during specific astronomical events. Get the date right, the angle right, the time right, and shadows falling on light-sensitive materials would trigger a release mechanism we still don't fully understand. The fragments come from oracle temples in Delphi, Dodona, and a lesser-known site on Crete. Each location held chambers where prophecies were delivered, where priests and priestesses communed with divine knowledge, and each location had restricted areas, chambers within chambers, places where even the initiated couldn't enter except under specific conditions. The locks that sealed these spaces weren't physical barriers you could pick or force. They were temporal, astronomical. They only opened when the cosmos said they could open. The surviving mechanism from Delphi consists of a bronze plate, approximately 1 meter square, covered in precisely positioned holes. These holes vary in diameter from 2 millimeters to 20 millimeters. They're arranged in patterns that modern astronomers recognize as stellar configurations, constellations, not as they appear to the naked eye, but corrected for proper motion, for the actual positions of stars in 3-dimensional space. Someone in ancient Greece understood that stars aren't fixed on a celestial sphere. They're objects at varying distances moving through space, and they encoded that understanding into a locking mechanism. The bronze plate would have been mounted vertically, positioned so that sunlight or starlight could pass through the holes. Behind it, according to reconstruction attempts, would have been a chamber containing materials sensitive to light exposure. Researchers debate what these materials might have been. Some suggest silver salts, primitive photographic chemistry that could have existed in the ancient world. Others propose organic compounds, plant extracts that change properties when exposed to specific wavelengths of light. The chamber itself is lost, but the bronze plate survives, its holes precisely aligned to astronomical coordinates. Here's how it theoretically worked. On specific dates, when celestial bodies aligned in specific configurations, light passing through the holes would create shadow patterns on the light-sensitive materials behind the plate. These patterns would trigger chemical or physical changes, substances expanding, contracting, changing viscosity, and these changes would release mechanical components, pins withdrawing, bars sliding, doors becoming free to open, but only during the brief window when the shadows aligned correctly. Miss the window, and you'd have to wait months or years for the next opportunity. Ancient Greek texts reference locks that opened by starlight, doors that could only be accessed during specific festivals tied to astronomical events. Scholars always assumed these were metaphors, poetic descriptions of spiritual or philosophical access to knowledge. Secret teachings revealed when the student was ready, when the stars aligned figuratively. But the physical evidence suggests we've been reading the texts wrong. They weren't metaphors. They were technical manuals, instructions for operating technology we've categorized as mythology because we couldn't imagine it was real. Modern archaeoastronomers have calculated when the bronze plate's holes would have aligned with known stellar positions. The math points to specific dates in the ancient Greek calendar, dates that correspond with major festivals, The Pythian Games, the Eleusinian Mysteries, religious events when temples would have been full of pilgrims, when rituals would have been performed, when access to restricted knowledge might have been granted to those who'd completed the proper initiations. The locks weren't just security. They were part of the ritual structure itself. The heavens had to grant permission for the knowledge to be accessed. What haunts me isn't the sophistication. We know the Greeks were capable astronomers. What haunts me is the implication. If they built locks that required celestial alignment to open, what did they lock away? What knowledge was considered so dangerous, so powerful, so transformative that it could only be accessed when the stars themselves agreed? And here's the truly disturbing question. Are those locks still out there? Still sealed? Still waiting for someone to stand in the right place, on the right date, at the right time, and watch as shadows older than empires finally reveal what they've been hiding? Because after 15 impossible locks, after 15 encounters with engineering that shouldn't exist, I've realized something. We haven't lost these technologies. They're still here, still functioning, still keeping secrets. We've just forgotten how to read the instructions. And maybe, just maybe, that forgetting was intentional. I'm back in my study now, surrounded by photographs and notes from 2 years of tracking these mechanisms across continents. The dust from Sacsayhuamán is still in my boots. The cold from Siberia still seems to linger in my bones. And I can't stop thinking about what these 15 locks represent. Not individually, collectively, as a pattern, as evidence of something we've been systematically ignoring. We tell ourselves a comfortable story about human progress, that we've climbed steadily upward from primitive beginnings, that each generation knows more than the last, that the ancients were simpler, less capable, working with cruder tools and cruder understanding. But these locks don't fit that narrative. They're too sophisticated, too precise, too aware of principles that we supposedly discovered centuries or millennia later. Bronze mechanisms that use pin tumbler technology 1800 years before Yale. Glass locks programmed with acoustic frequencies. Magnetic security systems that shouldn't exist in the Han Dynasty. Ice locks that use crystallization as computation. Either we're missing massive gaps in our understanding of ancient capabilities, or we're looking at inherited knowledge, technology passed down from earlier civilizations that we have no records of, cultures that rose and fell before recorded history began, leaving only fragments, only hints, only these impossible locks scattered across the world like breadcrumbs through a forest we're still trying to map. And maybe that's the real message. Maybe these locks aren't just securing physical spaces. Maybe they're securing something more fundamental. Knowledge that comes with responsibility, understanding that requires maturity, capabilities that demand wisdom. Every lock I examined could have been forced, could have been broken, could have been destroyed to access whatever lies behind it. But each one is designed to punish that approach. Break the bone lock and you learn nothing. Shatter the clay puzzle and whatever's inside is lost forever. Remove the wrong magnetic plaque and the tomb seals permanently. These aren't just security systems, they're tests. They're asking a question. Are you advanced enough to open this without destroying it? Are you patient enough to understand rather than conquer? Are you ready for what's inside? I don't think we are. Not yet, because we're still trying to force our way through mysteries that are asking us to evolve. Still trying to pick locks that are designed to be known, not defeated. And that's okay. These mechanisms have waited thousands of years. They can wait a little longer, until we're worthy of the knowledge they're protecting. until the right hands, with the right understanding, finally turn the key. Another piece of the puzzle, another secret swallowed by the ages. But I've learned one thing on this path. History doesn't whisper. It waits. And I'm not done listening yet.